Hi everyone, welcome to our first panel of the year. I'm Tom, CEO and founder of Jiminny, and we're super excited to have this panel today on sales trends for 2022. This is a topic obviously close to my heart, being a former sales leader. I think we've all seen so much change post-COVID in sales and how people sell. So last December, our marketing team pulled together a report. It was a lot of desk research, a lot of surveys to the community, and it threw up some super interesting topics that we're going to chat about today. So we have an all-star panel lineup of industry experts that I'm excited to introduce you to. Shabri, who's the CEO of SaleWorks, Paul, who's CEO of Sales Impact Academy, and Stephanie, who's the sales leader at Birdie Care. So guys, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit? Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Steph. I'm head of sales over at Birdie. So we're a Series A tech startup. We're a mission-driven startup, and we last year received funding from Index Ventures, who are one of the top VC firms in the world, which has been a really cool experience and journey for us to be on as we go through an exciting period of growth. Our sales team, we've got SDRs, and then we've got 2 sales execs teams who are focusing on both SME and mid-market and enterprise sales. And we're selling to home care agencies across the UK. So our big ambition is that we don't want older adults to end up in care homes. So we're trying to change the way that people in the UK age.
That's awesome. Cool. Shabri?
Hi everyone, I'm Shabri, CEO of SalesWorks. I started SalesWorks about 3.5 years ago, but I've been in the world of sales for about 12 years now. I started my career as an SDR and then went through to sales leadership, and then really started SalesWorks based on the challenges that I was seeing in sales. So I found this report really interesting because we work with companies from startup to scale up, helping them really revolutionize their teams through training and consulting. And we're really built on the thesis that sales is a science, not an art. And so, I thought I'm really excited to be here and talk through some of the trends for this year.
Awesome. Paul?
Cool. Right. Last and least. So I'm Paul, CEO and co-founder of Sales Impact Academy. Paul, there's 2-time CRO, a bit like Shabri just said. With the crazy scenario in the world is that there's, we're probably go-to-market is probably one of the biggest, I'd argue one of the most important professions in the world. There's never been any structured learning or education for it. It means we've all had to make it up as we go along. So I started Sales Impact Academy as an education and learning platform to try and help upskill every member of the go-to-market team. And we're a SaaS subscription-based service backed by Stage 2 Capital out of Boston, which you're an LP in, Tom. And Mark Roberge co-founded that fund with a guy called Jay Poe, who was formerly at Bessemer Ventures. And Mark's on the board of SI, which is brilliant. And things have gone pretty well in the last couple of years. We're about 100 people now, over 200 customers. We just signed PayPal on Monday, which was really exciting. And HubSpot just before Christmas also became not just a customer but an investor as well. So
amazing. Yeah, I know you guys have had some amazing growth, and some of the content that our team uses as well is great. So it's awesome. Cool, guys. So let's jump into it. So the first question is actually for all panelists. So in our trend report released before Christmas, we pulled out 6 key trends for this year. But is there anything obvious that you guys think was missing from the report? Alternatively, any one to you that particularly stands out? You can go first, Shabri, if you want on this question.
Thank you. So I thought they were well summarised. I don't think there was anything that was fundamentally missing, but maybe in addition to the first point there around buyer centricity and personalisation. I think what I would add to that is actually the increased need for customers to get that credibility and trust, the sort of non-product aspect. So I think gone are the days of logos on a sales slide and things like that. I think I think we're shifting more to industry focus, thought-provoking, value-led, that challenger style content. So I think that's what I would add to that. And in terms of which one stands out to me, I think just given what I said about SalesWorks, and for those of you who know me, training and coaching is something it's close to my heart. I think the stat on there that's in your report, Tom, that Gartner said 58% of reps receive coaching. My guess would be that if you ask managers how often do they coach, that number would be higher. And I think there's a gap in what reps see as coaching and what managers deem as coaching.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. The classic one would be, a pipeline review, thinking that it's a coaching session or something similar to that effect, and that might be the cause of that gap. That's really interesting. Paul?
I was actually a little surprised with how high that percentage is, right? It's 58% in the report. So I guess that's encouraging, but I think to Shabri's point, this is not a self-serving comment either, I think for both of us, but yeah, I think upskilling and coaching is absolutely critical. We talk about a rep with just a phone, a spreadsheet, and an email address, who's highly skilled, will always do well. But an unskilled rep, even with the best tech stack in the world, just simply won't. So actually, and again, it's this burden that's been placed back on companies because there's been no structured learning, right? And the industry is in total chaos as a result. I see that literally kind of every day, and crazy shit, crazy decisions being made about how to go to market and all that kind of good stuff. So I think that is literally like fundamental and critical to get right. To be successful. It's just making sure that your team have got the right skills, and that you do that through an education platform like SA, but also absolutely through things like coaching and mentoring as well. I think the interesting thing that I'm starting to pick up more and more, that I don't know if you call it missing, but as a trend for 2022, is actually probably a trend back to the AE actually doing more prospecting and pipeline generation. I think we've had this era, and I actually know, I know Mary Lou Tyler very well. She was the co-author of Predictable Revenue. In fact, we were literally having a text conversation about this over the weekend. I think everybody's taken that predictable revenue model of like very clear delineation between SDRs and AEs. SDRs go out there and create the pipeline, hand stuff over to AEs, and they close it, right? What Mary was saying to me over the weekend was that, and she actually even quoted the page 133, apparently, in the Predictable Revenue book, is that they've always said from day one that an AE must always have a territory, continue to have a territory, and continue to sort of develop pipeline. So I think the trend, and I'd love to say what Shabri thinks about this as well, given that you're out there meeting lots and lots of companies, is that actually we just need to make pipeline generation a core responsibility, I think, of the AE as well, and not just sit there twiddling your thumbs, moaning that the SDRs haven't created enough pipeline for you. And I think there's a number of ways that you can do that. I think a lot of people structure their CRMs and they do their territory planning by giving SDRs a big territory, like make this happen for the AE. And I think a much better approach that we're seeing, and we adopt internally at SIA as well, is that the territory belongs to the AE. Like the AE is the center of the universe, and they have support and help from the SDR, and they have support and help from marketing, of course. But it's the responsibility of the AE as CEO of their business to make sure that you're penetrating those accounts. And that big shift in mindset is massive, I think massive, and it just stops that the AE moaning about the SDRs. It just like nips that completely in the bud. So I think that's going to be, I think, a trend that's going to play out more and more in 2022 and beyond, is like the AEs have actually got to start prospecting and being smart about how they do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, you guys, I'm sure Shabri's seen this as you guys have, like every business is so different. Every vertical is so different. how does, what version of that model of predictable revenue works? Is it 1-to-1? Is it 2-to-1? How does it work? Is it none to one, as in because the product or whatever you're selling just hasn't got enough ACV or enough value? So I think it's really interesting. But I do know what you mean. Like, how are they building their own brand? How are they generating referrals? How are they still taking ownership for developing pipeline over a period of time? I think that's a really great point. Cool. Stephanie?
Yeah, well, I mean,
anything's missing, go ahead.
I think Shabri and Paul have both hit the nail on the head there around coaching, but also this idea of the AEs being accountable for the pipeline generation as well. The way that we talk about it within Birdie is that our account execs are accountable for their pipeline, their forecast, and their number. And so it's just, they know that they constantly have to be hitting the mark on all three of these areas. I love Paul's idea about being the CEO of your territory. I think that's really cool. For me, one of the things that is perhaps missing, but I think feeds in really nicely when we think about coaching, is all about retention and holding on to top talent, because I think that's one of the things that's going to get in the way of a company's success to the greatest extent. We're seeing at the moment, like the market is wild. When I'm speaking to I was speaking to Venatrix and Pareto Law over the last 24 hours, and they're talking about how it's ultimately an SDR's market because they're just in complete control. And what that's done from a salary and earnings point of view is just absolutely wild versus when I was a graduate and what you were looking at as a starting salary. So for me, like making sure that you've got that competitive package on offer, but thinking so much past that, because money gets someone in the door perhaps, but how are you making sure that you're training, developing, progressing, thinking about an individual's well-being? Ollie Sharp is one of the best people to follow if you want to think about employee well-being, in my opinion. And how are you incentivizing people to stay with you, not just for 6, 9, 12 months, but 2-3 years as you go through these periods of growth?
I think that's a really interesting point. I think everything happens much earlier now. Like, if I don't know, I feel like the old man in the room, Paul, might know as well. Like, if you go back in time, thinking as a young business or a startup growing really quickly, like making sure career path development and all of that would come a lot later for businesses. I think you have to start thinking about it a hell of a lot earlier. I think the really good point about how recruitment's just been a real challenge for a lot of companies. So many companies got funded, and there's so much money swirling around. The market's gone a bit bonkers, isn't it? And therefore everything's going up. I was actually speaking to one of our customers. They're I guess you call it a unicorn, like on whatever. They're a big company, 500 employees now, and they've grown really quickly. And they were just saying that when they restructured their sales team, they just had to change everyone's salary completely because they just weren't competitive, because they were not able to hire and bring people in. Therefore, they had to do a benchmarking exercise and check like everyone. I think they had like 120 AEs or whatever, and they had to just change the whole salary bracket banding, which is interesting, right? And that kind of leads into how you can be competitive. And it's not that the salary isn't the be all and end all. Like I used to work in HR software and well-being, and we talked about the whole kind of engagement strategy, and pay and benefits is just one part of your whole kind of structure of how you make people feel rewarded and show progression and everything. But I think it's something really, it's a big challenge this year that everyone's going to have to deal with. That's a really good point, Stephanie. Cool,
I think
great.
Sorry, Tom, just on that kind of linked as well to what Steph was just saying again around the sort of SDR BDR model and the wage inflation. I mean, what are you seeing? What are you seeing now, Steph, in terms of? I lost you. Sorry, I've lost the window. What are you seeing now? What are you being quoted in terms of like base salaries for SDRs?
Sure. So one agency has said they won't take on an SDR role that's below 30k base, 35k being competitive with some companies offering 40k base plus 20. So it's going up, and that's for someone without experience.
Yeah, And that apparently, again, just going back to my sort of WhatsApp conversation with Mary Lou, Salesforce did a report recently. Salesloft did a report recently. And they were saying that BDR generated leads close at like around 1%, which seems very low to me. And AE generated is closing at 33 to 45%. That's apparently a Salesloft report. So you've got, something doesn't add up there, right? Where you've got grads that are coming into the market at 40 grand base with no experience and like what, 20 grand, like 60K OTE. Like that's mind blowing. These close rates are really, really low. So like, I think the economics just are starting to just not add up basically.
If you're a lot, and I think it comes down to Tom's point earlier about the amount of investment that's being plowed into businesses. And if you're talking about mid-market and enterprise contracts, like they probably can justify it from a unit economics point of view. If you're looking at an SME sale, then it just doesn't stack up and it just doesn't work. So it's something that we've had to really put our heads into. But I think for us as a mission-driven startup, like millennials and the next generation aren't just driven by money, and we really kind of focus on that. Like we've got, for example, 8 weeks of well-being leave that our employees can take at their own discretion in whatever way they need to. So it's just different ways that you can support people with getting that right balance, progression, learning, earning well. So yeah.
I'm interested to see, like, Shabri, what you think, because it was a bit like this with marketing a few years ago. It's like, where's the ROI all the time? Where, how can I measure this? And sometimes, Paul, it's interesting if you're measuring that conversion rate, like exactly into deals from their piece, but actually how much of your SDR or BDR function is brand awareness and just getting the name out there, but fishing with a spear rather than a net. And it gets talked about all the time. But I wonder if it gets to a point where, you have to have the right balance of the team and the economics right, but how much of it is part of the marketing function and actually following up on campaigns, and doesn't always have to be about necessarily generating the deal, but it can just be a form of marketing. I don't know what you think about that, Shabri. Or
so I think with an SDR team, I think you have to have like a really clear like mission statement and purpose of the team, right? And that can be a number of different things, but it can't be a ton of different things. So it could be, I want to use my SDR team to help generate brand awareness and, ABM and ABS strategies. It could be, we want to generate, 50 qualified appointments per month. It could be that I want to have this as the talent bench for my organization and sort of create future AE superstars, whatever that is going to then determine the metrics that you put behind that. But what I've seen and what's frustrating is when companies are like, I want SDRs to sort of do everything that the AEs don't want to do, right? And they sort of end up, doing a bit of an RFP because, one of the AEs can't be bothered and, doing like meeting notes and follow up and CRM. And that SDR team is never going to be successful because they've got no clear success metrics. So when investors look at that, they're going to say, well, what's the ROI of this team? And it's really difficult to kind of measure it and put any sort of quantitative metrics around that. And so I think that's where companies then have to be clear with like the investment they're making and the direction. I agree with everything that Paul and Steph have said. But I think if you're going to be hiring entry level talent, which by the way, that's how I started in sales, and I'm a massive, that's how I've always hired teams. It has to be paired with the right training and development and support. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm going to go and hire someone at 30 grand who's just come out of university and, they can either sink or swim. You can't have it both ways. And so I think, when we talk to SDRs, when we ask them, what made you join this company, it's no longer around, our office has a really cool rooftop and we've got beer machines and, that sort of thing. It's actually, like Steph said, it's about well-being, it's about what's the purpose of the organization, where can I go in this organization? And I don't think it's the difference between 2,000, 5,000, 7,000 anymore. I think it's about people buying into the company and that leadership. So I think it does come back to the metrics. And I think, Paul, it was an event that I was, one of your SIA events that Pete Crosby hosted.
Yeah.
I was talking about metrics on there, and I pulled up a calculator, because we have a calculator which sort of helps companies walk through their cost metrics, and it really goes as granular from like the conversion rates from MQL to SAL, SAL to SQL, SQL to op and op to close, and it's got cost metrics per each of those stages, and it actually shows you whether you're going to, just even based on how many meetings and opportunities you want to get, whether this is even going to be cost productive for you. And I think getting into that granularity is really, really important.
Yeah, that whole career development thing is so important. We did for the first time, we did our employee NPS recently. We had some really, really good results, but there was like 2 or 3 common themes, and one of them was career development. You know, coming back from the team as a scaling company, doing everything 100 miles an hour. You know, those sort of things. But I can hear it and see it in the feedback from the team as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some great points there, guys. I think that that perspective on manager versus rep coaching, you know, the whole prospecting piece for AEs, and obviously this whole, I wouldn't say it's a war for talent like it has been historically, but definitely how you retain and look at your team as you grow is going to be really important this year.
Oh, cool. I think there's an absolute war. There's definitely it's a bloodbath out there.
I was being polite. I think, you know, the thing is with recruitment, you always want to take, you know, it's interesting to talk about it, right, guys? Like you want to take your time, put people through presentations, tests, have a process, but you're being forced to move quicker than ever to make decisions. It's like, if you don't move in a week on an SDR, then you're going to lose the person. I don't know. That's how I feel. Like we're being forced to recruit quicker and faster. That's the pinch.
It's a bloodbath because of what happened in 2021. I mean, literally, as you all know, absolutely smashed all records for investment into the space. And every single B2B investment pretty much translates to more SDRs, more AEs, more CS people that don't exist. They just literally don't, like the pool of people just isn't there. So you got these twin issues of zero structural learning and education in the space, coupled with extreme demand. So yeah, it's definitely a war right now, I'd say. Anyway,
that's great feedback. So I'll jump on to question number 2 now, guys. So trend 1 speaks about bias centricity and personalization. So that's probably not so new, right? But what does it mean to you and your team in 2022? So Shabri, do you want to go first? What does bias centricity and personalization mean when you're training teams? Or
so I think for us, the first thing is it's understanding the difference between personalization and relevance. And I think these two often get sort of commingled in. So personalization is something that, you know, is personal to you, right? So it could be, you know, something that I know about you, Tom. It could be the football team you support, or you know, a blog that you wrote, and sort of, or even, you know, taking this report as an example, right? If I reached out to you and I referenced that report, that's personalized to you. Relevance is actually hitting the things that are relevant to you in your roles and the challenges you might be facing. And so I think the first thing is separating those two things. I think the second thing is if 90% of consumers research their product online before purchasing, it means they already know all about the product, but they're missing the why. So what we're focusing on this year is actually focusing on the non-product aspect. So what I mean by that is the sales experience, the value creation, the onboarding, the interactions. And I had this awful buying experience just before Christmas. I'm not going to name the company, but I had this awful buying experience, and I was
name them.
Can't do that.
And what's hilarious is I was about to sign this contract. We had the budget, I was about to sign this contract, and the AE was pressurizing me to close the contract before their Christmas party, right? And they were talking to me about, you know, well, our Christmas party's on Tuesday, so I really need it signed before then. She wasn't listening. It was all their agenda, their goals, and not mine. And they still haven't signed the contract. We're on the 19th of January, and they still haven't signed the contract. And it left such a sour taste in my mouth because it felt like it was all about getting the sale and not beyond. And I think one of the things that we're working with our clients on, but also internally, is just focusing on that customer value and success piece. So I think what we're going to see this year is really the rise in the role of customer success as well. More companies bringing that into sales, and bringing that, under one revenue function. But also companies we speak with, one thing they usually say is like, our customer success team aren't that commercial. And so I think we're going to see an increase in a rise in demand for commercial acumen within that customer success role as well.
That's amazing. There's so much to unpack there, but it's interesting you say like personalization and relevance, and I totally get the two differences. So, which one does the team lead with? What, have you got any kind of like insight to, do you mix it up and have a combination of the two, or like is it one that's more powerful or gets better results, or in your experience?
I think it's a combination, but I think that you'll get further with relevance than you will do with personalization. I'd be curious to know what Paul and Steph think as well, because I'm sure you've got people reaching out to you and trying to sell to you all the time. If it was me, I'd rather something was relevant to me, because I think if someone asks me a question that is relevant to a challenge that I'm facing, I'm going to be engaged. I don't mind if someone says like, Shabri, I saw that you were recently hiring. That doesn't, everyone's doing that right now. So it's not really cutting through the noise. And I think relevance is arguably more important, but curious to hear what Paul and Steph think as well.
I'd say that personalization is assumed. Like, I would expect that you get my name right and you know what my company is, and that I'd assume that, like, that's a kind of starting point. But I don't think I would praise someone in the team for getting personalization right. But I think actually making sure it is relevant is essential, and is what will make someone stand out from my point of view when I'm receiving kind of prospecting calls or emails. For me, I think there comes a really interesting balance around. So in the SDRs in our team are enrolled in Sales Impact Academy, and one of the first things that they learn is a difference between personalization and customization, and how the importance of research and making sure that for the personalization, you can rely on tools, right? And it's very kind of basic functionality within technology now, that it can automatically pull through someone's name and their company and their job title, for example. But then the idea is so similar to Shabri's concept of relevance, that actually customization is demonstrating that research you've done. Now, if you're in an SME environment, you can't justify spending the time to do that detailed research on a prospect, because it's a numbers game. It's volume. And so to a point that Shabri made earlier about truly being like industry experts and understanding that landscape, that becomes incredibly important. So do you not only intensely understand your prospect and their role and the challenges that they face, but specific to the industry that they're in? That's how you can then customize at scale. Whereas in that mid-market and enterprise space, you can justify spending that time really digging into where your prospect is living, what they care, not living physically, but like from a social media, like in a social context, what they care about, etc., what their interests are. So the industry bit for me is like the crux of where buyer centricity should be going for salespeople at the moment. It's
always a winner when I get an email saying, "Hi, Tim."
the last point I would make actually on this is, like, I think when I reflect on my experiences of buying, the people that have impressed me the most have been the ones that truly listen, and they just get it and they understand. And I think where you kind of separate good and great salespeople are the ones that really can listen and get to the crux of the problem and really understand that problem. Because any company can hire software developers and engineers that are going to go and build features and functionality, but can you actually truly understand the problems that you're trying to solve and then go and build solutions for that, as opposed to features and functionality? So that's kind of, I think, a really important point as well when you think about buyer centricity.
Well, what I'm definitely hearing is it's like relevance, but with the why, like, and that's becoming so much more like when an industry becomes mature, 80% of features and functions are predominantly the same. Someone may get a run on a new feature for 6 months or 9 months, or but a lot of it is the same. So it's like, it's about the partnership and why you can help them in a different way. And I think I'm definitely hearing that from you guys. It's that relevance, but then also explaining the why when you get that opportunity, whether it be on a video, email, first call, whatever. Paul, have you got any kind of thoughts on the bias centricity and personalization?
Yeah, maybe following on a little bit from what Stephanie was saying, just around tools and the Sam Nelson at Outreach has got this quite well known Agoji sequence now, and it sort of talks quite well, I think, to this, which is you can actually create like efficiencies and scale and be very customized, right? In your approach to Stephanie's point about the difference between personalization and customization. And the Agoji sequence, really super, the sort of high level is that he talks about opening with making an entrance, right? Which is that very first touch point is super well researched and relevant, right? And then you build efficiencies and scale through the subsequent touch points that you then automate through like an outreach or sales loft. And I think, again, it just comes back to that a lot of people are just getting a little bit lazy and they're using tools to try and automate the shit out of everything, and it's just not a good strategy. I think the other thing that we're probably going to look at this year as well is, so Sixth Sense is actually is a customer of ours, but I'm really interested more this year in exploring like sentiment tools, so that you actually can tell and see if someone is in market and actually interested in your product. I mean, that's got to be the sort of holy grail, right? Is if you know that with those sentiment tools, it's not about the individual, but that company X, right? Jiminny's looking for this kind of thing because we know from Jiminny people that they're searching for it. That I think is really, really exciting, and I think did either of you, Shabri or Stephanie, use any sentiment tools, or have you?
We looked into it, but we weren't able to. We did a sample, and we weren't able to surface enough sentiment within our sector, so it wasn't really. We weren't going to get the return out of it, sadly.
Yeah, interesting.
We just started to use intent tools, and so intent is just the first piece of that. And I think when we've laid the foundation with that, I think sentiment seems to be the next big thing. So.
It goes back to what you said earlier, Paul, with the conversion rates and stuff. Is like it doesn't matter what you are. Obviously, you want to train your team. If you're talking about BDR and SDR in that example, if they need to be going after stuff that has interest, has intent behind it, and then like sentiment, because then their time is well spent, right? Otherwise, they'd never to be looking for the needle in the haystack. There's so many businesses out there, and it's all about timing. So that definitely helps. The last thing you mentioned as well, Shabri, I thought was interesting, was just that you talk about the rise of CS and that kind of upskill, and I'd love everyone else's thoughts on that. We've outnumbered CS to sales, bootstrapped to a small amount of funding, like 3-1 the whole time, because we have a customer kind of first model, and then we've made them very upsell focused, because expansion is a massive part of our model as much as new business. So that's something that we've always been in, but I think I've always had the philosophy you can't control the market or competitors, but you can control the service you give, and that's something that we've been. But I'd love your guys' view on that, because it doesn't really come up in the report, but CS being focused more on sales and how that might look in 2022. Maybe you guys got any views?
It's a topical one for us at the moment. So, because if you look at our mid-market and enterprise team, we've only just had the opportunity for crossing up because of product development. So we've just had this massive product launch, which is like huge for our customer base. And for our mid-market and enterprise segment, the account execs are going to be responsible for expansion, whereas for SME, it's going to sit in the customer success org. And so we're exploring at the moment where the responsibility remit should sit and what it's going to look like in the future. Do we have it all figured out? No, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes and how it differs between the two segments for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see it becoming more and more relevant in terms of how CS sell, for sure. Cool. Question number. Oh, sorry.
The last bit, what I'd say on that as well is what we're trying to identify within our customer success org is the role of product-led growth and how we can minimize like what a human needs to do so that the human is only adding value over and above where we can look at product functionality.
Yeah, it's almost like how consultative you are, what you do in your process to help them in CS to then do like you can break it down to upsell or organic growth, and the kind of like two different things, aren't they? But they can be driven by the team in different ways. Cool. Question number 3, guys. So as baby boomers retire, millennials are becoming key decision makers. It's increasingly the norm. I think I saw a stat the other day, actually, the first millennial is now 40. I think I'm there in 2 years' time. So, and how does this influence your go-to-market and sales motion today? So I don't know if anyone's got any views on that.
Am I a baby boomer?
When were you born?
I'm 46.
If you don't mind sharing. You're not a millennial, unfortunately.
No,
mate.
I'm 6 years out from that. I'm also a long way from retiring. That sounds really...
Well, that's a whole nother point about will people retire in the 4-day week, which we probably won't have time for to discuss today.
I don't think that's an option as a founder. I've got quite an interesting, funny story about this, actually. So I think that we had this crazy thing happen over Christmas. We had loads and loads. Suddenly, we had loads and loads and loads of people applying for our open jobs, like just a huge kind of spike. And then we noticed on the web traffic that we had, like, I think over the course of a week or something, 17,000 hits to, unique people come to our careers page. And it was just like, this is really weird. And then our recruiting team kept hearing people like refer to this TikTok video. And we're like, what is this TikTok video? And what had happened, we uncovered it, is one of the people in our education team. So we've got really super like flexible kind of like working hours and approaches to all of our kind of like people. And one of the things that we introduced was unlimited vacation, which is not a new concept, but we're also making sure that everybody, including the US team, which is about half the company now, make sure you take those 25 days, right? Because there's lots of stuff that we've all read about. You flick to, you move to an unlimited model and people actually take less holiday. So we're being very conscious about that. And we're being very active in making sure that people take that time off, to Shabri's point about mental health and just recharging. Anyway, so we announced this, and one of the education team did a TikTok video. It only lasted about a minute, and it, she was like, it had like this kind of like rap music in the back, and she was like, "Oh my god, like unlimited time off," and she did this little TikTok video. It got 3.4 million views, right? And like I said, drove 17,000 unique people to our site, and it was just nuts. I think it got 7,000 comments, and it was just like, whoa, this is absolutely insane. So I think that. There's this whole new generation coming through. I'd go even like younger, right? You've got a whole Gen Z generation hitting the market now as well. So I think social selling was one of the points that you brought up in the report. I think that social selling, you don't just think LinkedIn, right? There are these massive platforms like TikTok. I mean, literally, it took us all by surprise. It definitely showed my age. I mean, I haven't even got TikTok. But yeah, I think there are these new kind of like platforms coming through. I think that is how we're now sort of thinking slightly differently. In fact, we might even create some curriculum around using TikTok, or Instagram in terms of a part of your sort of go to market. But yeah, that's how it's kind of influencing how we're thinking about our go-to-market.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it's I don't know, like I think I can't speak for everyone, but in B2B teams, I feel like no one's quite mastered Instagram yet, let alone going like TikTok and Snapchat, right? Which is like almost feels like a generation below. So that's really great that you're thinking outside the box, and I do think about that, and like how are you going to attract the next generation that does think completely differently, you know.
I think it's called Snap, not Snapchat.
Anyway. Oh, has it changed? Oh God, dinosaur here. I didn't even know that.
So we'll look forward to seeing your TikTok account then, and all your learnings, Paul, as you go through this.
It could be a great show.
Watch this space.
What about you, Shabri? Have you got on go-to-market sales motion, how that's kind of influenced by who the decision makers are today?
Yeah, we've thought about this recently. I think they are such a hyper online generation. Paul said the kind of generation after this is, TikTok, and that's who you want to be attracting through recruitment and things like that. But I think, when you see a rise in decision makers at that millennial stage, I think it's this, they learn content from so many different angles, right? So they are tech savvy, so they're learning content from your website, from different social pages, and not just LinkedIn, so your Instagram and other things. And so we're doing a lot more around cross-channel marketing, so moving away from product-led marketing to actually value-led marketing, right? So thought leadership and things like that. I think the second thing is, this was a really scary stat that I read from Forrester, and it said 57% of B2B decision makers find the content they receive useless. And I think that just goes to show, that those kind of outdated newsletters and that kind of product marketing update is fading out massively. And so, we've talked about intent and sentiment and things like that and customer success already today, but we've just invested in G2. And this really helps with the research piece, the gaining trust and credibility. And I think where millennials are valuing online reviews, peer-to-peer reviews and things like that a lot more. And I think the last thing I would say about millennials is there is some phone resistance, because I don't think they've grown up, having to call a local minicab company to book a taxi or call a restaurant to order a takeaway. Everyone's kind of grown up in that Uber delivery style thing where everything's at your fingertips. And so I think there is something from millennials where there is a bit of phone resistance, like, why pick up the phone if you can text me? Why do I have to speak to you on the phone if you can email me? And so it's just making sure that we do have that kind of multi-channel approach, and meeting people where they want to be met, essentially.
Yeah, I can see that. The one thing for me there is that I think we all see it, right? Like, if you look at your inbox or your LinkedIn or wherever medium you get that, you don't see enough value-led marketing, do you? You don't see enough personalization. But that's what stuck out for me is I think if companies can think about that, that's definitely a way that you can stand out in your go-to-market motion, for sure.
If you look at the volume, the volume of LinkedIn messages I get is absolutely wild, and I find it absolutely extraordinary that salespeople can think that just connecting and sending a message on LinkedIn is sufficient. If you look at Shabri and Paul as two perfect examples of two incredibly successful businesses, Shabri posts incredibly valuable content and reports and data and insights and tips and tricks that create a huge amount of credibility around her business, and you can see the value that she would be able to add if she was to come in and coach and develop your team. With Paul, he's got the speaker events that he's got shared on LinkedIn, and automatically with the people that he pulls in attaches credibility to his brand and gives you a reason to interact with his company. So it's that value to someone that is going to build that credibility with your but sending a LinkedIn message isn't going to cut through the noise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think people associate a lot less with the company now. Even as followers on LinkedIn, they almost associate with the people. People would think of the CEO, or maybe there's a CMO behind it or a CRO. The people are the face of the company, almost like Steve Jobs was at Apple to some extent for a long time, right? That people just the brand isn't as important. It's who's an industry expert, and what knowledge are they driving? And I can see that being more of a bigger, it is a bigger trend, and you see people almost associating with the person rather than the company. Cool, that's great there. So another question, guys, coaching was something that came up in the report. It's obviously really close to our hearts at Jiminny, and indeed is one of the trends for this year. How has this changed for you guys over the past few years? I know, Shabri, you're kind of going into business and doing it every day, and probably you guys are with your own teams as well. You know, how have you seen it changed, and what kind of plans have you got in this area? So who went last time first, Paul? Shabri? Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So coaching, yeah, that's an interesting one. So if we look at pre-pandemic, the rate at which our SDRs would ramp was so much faster than what we've seen during the pandemic. And that is just that, like, it's such a poor use of this word because it's the wrong definition, but osmosis of, like, you're just sitting in an office and you just hear other people talking, whether it's product, whether it's your AEs, other SDRs, you just learn. And you can, if you're a sales leader, you can just turn around and give some live coaching there because you've heard the conversation. It becomes a lot more difficult when you're operating within a remote environment. For us, we've relied on HubSpot and recording calls, and we're now, Tom, as you know, we're moving over into the world of Jiminny, and we're so excited about introducing that call intelligence software. I think having that technology is one part of the puzzle. I think, like Shabri said, dedicating time to it, but for us as well is actually the tools that surround that to help the reps to succeed. So for us, we've got a competency framework. So it's very clear what an SDR needs to do to move from a junior to a mid to a senior and then to be an exec, making sure you've got that framework in place with competency so that they know where they have to focus to improve. But then also as well, what are you looking at from a scorecard point of view? Because you can't just rely on the manager coaching them day in, day out. Yes, it needs to be a large proportion of their time, but it's not always the most scalable way. So how can we ensure that we're encouraging peer-to-peer coaching and self-reflection, but in a way that is actually objective as opposed to subjective? So implementing those scorecards as well so that the team have the tools to succeed in a coaching environment, I think is really, really, really important as well. And we're very excited because I think it's going to be a game changer for us in how we actually ramp and develop our SDRs in that remote environment.
Yeah, the structure around the tech is so important. You know, you don't just put in HubSpot and have a marketing machine. You don't just put in Salesforce and have a sales machine. You just put in Jira and it sorts your engineering team out overnight. Like, it just doesn't happen. I think sometimes with the kind of machine learning and AI wave, people get kind of into this will just help us suddenly be able to coach or train. There is a lot of effort and work and structure that has to go behind it, like with anything. So I think that's a really good point. Cool. Shabri, have you got anything you want to add on that? How you've seen it change? Yeah, I know you're in the weeds with lots of companies every day doing this. So
I think I would what Steph said around the competency frameworks. I think it's making coaching quantitative, not just qualitative, right? So not just saying like, oh, hey Tom, that was a good discovery call. Like, what does good mean? Do you know what I mean? And so actually making it quantitative, so on scoring, like demonstrating to reps what they did well and where they could improve and where's the room for improvement. I think the second thing I would say on this is recognizing the difference between training and coaching. And as managers, when do you train someone versus when do you coach someone? Because I don't think you can coach someone if they haven't had the training. So what I mean by that is, let's say we were to hire a brand new SDR straight out of university. I can't coach him or her on a discovery call because they won't know the answers and what they could do better because they haven't had the fundamentals of training, right? In the same way that you can't coach a football team without them having done training and practice and getting to a certain level. So I think it's about when you introduce coaching, how do you introduce the fundamental skills through training and reinforcement? And then when are reps ready to do coaching? And I'm a big fan of the situational leadership model, which is, when you should be more directive versus, more coaching with your leadership style. But I do think that people are taking it more seriously now, less peer-to-peer learning, less ad hoc, less notes in the CRM. And I do see, at least with some of the companies we work with, that people are taking it a lot more seriously.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, I totally see that. Paul, have you got any thoughts on that as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think Shabri, you hit the nail on the head. And this is what I struggled with when I was, even a CRO. I think it's not even, Shabri, just the skills and the knowledge of how to do the job, like in the individual, but the manager also has to know how to do the job as well. And that was my insecurity. I was like, I don't really feel I can upskill a rep, because I didn't think I was like, I didn't think I've got all the answers myself, right? And it goes right back to, so I think there's almost a lack of confidence with the team leads and the managers who've got these big gaps in skill and sort of knowledge. And so, yeah, I mean, it sort of hits to the heart of the problem that we're trying to solve, which is like creating that base like skill level at scale, so that you can then, you can be really effective on top and turn people into sort of masters of their trade. And we're doing a lot of thinking around, and we're creating a lot of materials. We sort of call them impact guides, which is supporting the manager and the team lead on implementing the learning that comes through the academy. But you need that base case, as Shabri said. But the systematic problem is that many of the managers don't actually have the full set of skills and knowledge in the first place, which then makes coaching rather hard.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think if you say, what have you seen over the last 2 years? It's great to get your guys' point of view, but that definition between training and coaching is now, I think, in SaaS anyway, or tech, has been split out. People understand that they're very different things. I'm like, right, how do I use SIA to have a foundation to train my team, and then how do I coach properly after on those things they've been trained on? People are thinking about this in a way that 5 years ago or whatever. People just were not thinking like that, or were not trying to apply it to their business. So that's great. Awesome. Guys, there's been some amazing content there. I can't thank you enough for taking your time and sharing it with everyone. So thank you very much. We'll be doing more panels throughout the year. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, our blog, on the website. And obviously, you can reach out to the guys if you have any questions as well. But thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.